In today's video, I'm going to show you how to edit your raw photos right inside of Adobe Photoshop. When you open a raw photo inside of Adobe Photoshop, you should be greeted with the Camera Raw window. Now in this window, you can go ahead and you can adjust all of the settings from your photo right here before dropping it into Photoshop. So to begin with, I'm just going to start by rotating this 90 degrees to make this the correct way. And now I'm going to go over to this bar on the right and we're going to start with the basic color correction. So we'll select basic, and then as you can see, I can adjust the temperature of this image. I can make this cold, I can make this warm, but I'm going to adjust this to around 4,900. And then we can also increase the tint, so we can add more green, more purple, but I don't want this to be too much. So I'm just going to leave this at +2. Going down, we can adjust the exposure, we can increase or decrease the contrast, so I'm going to add a bit of contrast to this. I'm going to pull the highlights all the way down to regain that highlight detail from the image. As you can see on the bridge, if I pull the highlights up and down, you can see all of the detail being restored, pulling that down to -100. So I'm going to keep that there. I'm not going to bother messing with the shadows, neither the whites or the blacks, but then if I go down to clarity, you can see this is adding an extreme amount of contrast to the image, which is a bit ugly if I have that much. So I'm just going to keep this at around 40%. I'm going to add a slight dehaze. Vibrance is going to boost the colors, which is a little similar to saturation, but it's not as ugly as saturation. Now play around in this basic color correction window and try and regain all of the original colors from the image. If I press this button down here, you can see the original unedited raw file is on the left and the edited file is on the right. So this is a really good reference point. Now if we go back up to the bar and we go over to the next menu, we have a tone curve. And as you can see, if we change the channel in the tone curve, we can adjust the red, the green and the blue channels all separately. Now as you can see, if I pull the highlights in the blue channel, you can see the highlights. You can see the highlights in the blue channel increasing and decreasing. But let's go back over to the red channel. We'll go over to the shadows in the red, we'll pull this down, and then we'll make sure the mid-tones, that's the middle, we'll make sure that is set back to 0. So we'll make sure that is perfectly in the center. Now we'll go over to the next menu, and this is the detail menu, so we can add some sharpening to this. If we increase the sharpness all the way up to 150, if we zoom into the image, you can see how ugly sharpening can be if we overdo this. If you over sharpen an image, it will look really ugly, so only use sharpening just a little bit here. So as you can see, if I zoom all the way in, my sharpness is set to 147, you can see all of the pixels. It's nasty and ugly, but when we have it 0, everything's kind of blended in together. It looks very soft. So I'm going to leave this at around 60%. The rest of the sharpening window is fine as it is, but feel free to go through all of those settings for your own photo. Now we'll go over to the next menu, that is HSL adjustments. That's hue, saturation and luminance adjustments. So this is where we can target specific colors within the photo. So adjusting one of the sliders for the hue will allow us to change the color of a specific color. So if I change the yellow and push it towards orange, then the yellows are going to go more orange. And if I adjust the blues and push this towards aqua, again the blue, the sky is going to look more aqua rather than like a dark blue. Now once you're happy with the hue, we can go over to the saturation and we can increase or decrease the saturation of each individual color profile. Now in my example, I'm going to slightly decrease the sky, so that's the blues. And then I'm going to take away some of that harshness from the street below. So I'm going to take away some of the reds, and I'm also going to take away some of the oranges. Now because we've taken away some of the oranges and the reds, I'm going to nicely contrast that by pulling the saturation of the blue channel back up again. Now next we have the luminance, and this is kind of like the intensity of each individual color channel. So if you look at the red traffic here, so this was red, but because I took the saturation out of this, it's a white color. But if I pull the red all the way up to +100 or -100, you can see how that's being affected by the luminance. If you pull this all the way down to -100, then it's going to look very, very flat. There's going to be next to no color. It's going to look really weird, but +100 will look a bit intense. So again, go through all of these settings and find something that works for you. Next up we have split toning, and this is basically giving us the ability to add color to our highlights and our shadows separately. So we can add a color in our shadows, we can add a color in our highlights, and we can increase the saturation by pulling on one of these saturation sliders. But I don't want to change anything in this image, I don't want to use any split toning. Of course you might want to use it in your image though. Next up we have lens corrections, and this is basically going to fix any fisheye or any lens distortion that you may have encountered if you're using a wide angle lens. At the bottom of lens correction we have vignetting, and this is basically going to allow us to add a white or a black vignette to our image. This is very soft, but this is a really nice effect. Now next menu is grain, this is effects. So in grain, if I pull this all the way up to 100% and we zoom in, you can see it's nice and smooth at 0, and then all the way at 95, 100, it looks really, really noisy and a little bit too ugly. So if you're going to add grain, just add a little bit of grain. Now moving on, we have calibration, and here we can calibrate the colors of the shadows and the red, green and blue channels. Next window is the preset window, and we can add presets into our color, creative, black and white, curve, grain, sharpening, vignetting. And then last window is snapshots, but we don't need that for now. So once you're happy with this image in the camera raw window, we can go ahead and open this inside of Adobe Photoshop. So at the very bottom, rather than pressing done, we want to press open image, and that will launch the image inside of Adobe Photoshop. And rather than launching the raw file, this is going to open that edited photo that we just edited in camera raw. So of course, once we're in Photoshop, we now have the freedom and the flexibility to do whatever we like with this image. Now I'm going to do this really cool effect where you can make part of the image black and white and just feature one part of the image in color. And in order to do this, we just have to go down to the bottom right corner of Photoshop and create a brand new black and white layer. Go over to the eraser tool, and we're just going to erase parts of the image that we want to see in color. Of course, we want to adjust the brush hardness and the size of the brush. Now go over your image and paint over parts of this image that you want to appear in color. Of course, I'm doing a really, really terrible job at this. It's not neat at all, but that's just because I'm showing you how to do the technique. Now, if you didn't want to do that, we can go ahead and we can get rid of that and create a brand new black and white filter. And using the eraser tool, we can erase the street. So we have the building in black and white, and the street and the sky will be in color. So paint over everything that you want to appear in color. And now as you can see, the building and the bridge, they're both in black and white, and the street and the sky are in color. So this is just one simple thing that you can do to your photos inside of Photoshop. Now of course, if you wanted to show more color in the building, we could pick out specific parts. So we can pick out the yellow window frames, so we'll paint those out. There are 1,000,001 things you can do with your photo inside of Adobe Photoshop. So take the time to go through Camera Raw, learn all of the settings, enhance your photo, take it to the next level. And once you're happy with this, just export this, share it with the world, and I look forward to seeing your photos.
And there you go. If you enjoyed watching that video, then please do let me know in that comment section below. And don't forget to subscribe and check out the previous video if you want to see more content from this channel. See you next time.